Hey, everybody. Welcome to a podcast where we're talking about the Knicks and the Raptors after the huge trade between obviously both teams, legal opponents as well. Crazy that they were able to connect on that. I can't remember who said that they thought this was the first trade made between someone who was the plaintiff and, like the
Yeah,
legal jargon. But anyway, we're here. OG Anunoby is a Nick. Precious Achua is a Nick. Malachi Flynn is a Nick. And the Raptors get a second round pick, a really good one. It's the Pistons. Probably going to be 31 or 32,
yeah.
one would assume. And they get Emmanuel Quickley, who for many people, they hope and dream that is the point guard of the future. They get RJ Barrett, who I think a lot of people, the optimistic point of view is that he will provide, solid starter level wing play. And at 23 and a fairly sizable contract, can grow into a larger role with meaningful additions over time. That's the optimistic take. And obviously, there's lots of stuff to talk about from the Knicks point of view. This is Ariel Pacheco, my favorite Knicks writer and talker. I find him to be incredibly insightful, especially like a lot of guys talk about the offensive side of the basketball. It's easier to get by with that stuff because you can just look at numbers and pretend you watched and you'll be able to kind of like fake it. But defense, there's no faking it. I don't find anyway. A lot of people have a tough time nailing that down. Here to talk about it all with me, Ariel. How you doing, man?
Doing good, man. Doing good. I think that was kind of like a little great segue talking about defense because OG and Quickly are like two very impactful defenders in two very
Yeah.
different ways. They both bring a tremendous amount of value on that end, but they do it so differently that like kind of seeing how that's going to affect both squads in the long run is so interesting to see.
Yeah, especially since they're both expiring in a way, right? And the hope for both teams is that they re-sign these guys to sizable contracts. OGs will be larger, even just in the proposed asking price that they've both spoken. But the future for both teams is being shaped by this trade. Now, I will be on a Strickland podcast either next week or the week after to talk like all of the Knicks stuff first and foremost. But since I have you here, this is a Raptors podcast. We are going to keep it
Mm.
with the incoming Raptors. That's where we're going to start first.
We're good with
Emmanuel
that. We're good with
Quickley,
that.
that's what we're doing. If you can just give me the elevator pitch for Raptors fans who haven't read Louis Satzman's fantastic piece on RaptorsRepublic.com, if you just want to know, like from somebody who covers the Knicks and has a really great eye for analyzing basketball, what's up? Give me the story.
I think the inkling when you see Emmanuel Quickly is think small guard, spark plug, kind of come off the bench, kind of like your typical like the famous one when he was coming into the league was like comparing him to Lou Will, and like I think he is capable of doing all those things and like but I feel like it's missing the story, right? Like you're missing like a lot of what he actually does do and bring to the floor. He is a spark plug, but he's not a guy that's gonna hurt you on the defensive end. In fact, he's gonna bring a ton of impact there. And it's not going to be anything that's necessarily loud, right? Like he's not OG Anunoby in that like you're putting him on the best opposing ball handler or creator. You're putting him off the ball, and you're going to see that he's going to nail these like stunts and help, and he's going to like jump and lunge at the ball handler at the perfect time. And maybe he doesn't get the steal, but like maybe Scotty Barnes on the weak side gets the steal. Like he's just a very like he's a definition of an amplifier and a connector, and that's on both ends of the floor, right? I think you hear a lot about offensive connectors, but he's genuinely like what I like to call a defensive connector, right? Like he when he plays with like Julius Randle and when he played with Jalen Brunson and he was on the floor, you can see that the mistakes they drop off a lot, right? Like um, Julius Randle's job is a lot easier because now he just has to tag and recover back to the corner. That's all you're asking Julius to do here. But if when Quickly's like off the floor, now there's maybe more responsibility on those guys' hands. So with Quickly, like the offensive stuff is going to be loud and it'll be fun because like pull up threes are fun and everybody loves it, and he can get into the lane now, he gets to the rim now. But where he's really going to like wow you and get your attention if you're paying close enough attention is to watch him on the defensive end and see all the fun little like quirky things he's able to bring there.
The term that I use for defensive connector, I think I would use insulator, as in when he's out there, you are able to insulate teammates from mistakes and also insulate them to the point that they get to be perhaps like a little bit more advantageous as a defender, a little bit more adventurous, let's say. And he certainly does. Raptors fans should be well aware of, they've seen between Kyle Lowry and Fred VanVleet over some of their years, a lot of really, really intelligent off-ball guard play. And both of those guys, also kind of similar to Quickley, are more impactful as the off-ball defender than they are as the on-ball defender. And Quickley, Fred VanVleet, and Kyle Lowry, all sub 6'4", all have been part of elite defenses and all nail rotations all over the damn place. We're going to keep it not with defense. We're going to change it over to offense. So there is expectations because of that pop, the loud parts of his game. Emmanuel, we didn't really see it in his debut, but when you go through the film, like I'm currently watching all of his pull-ups throughout his career. That's the every possession thing I'm doing for him. And then at the end of the season, I'm sure I'll have something where it's every Raptor possession. But the thing is, it is loud, but also there are limitations. I think coming into this, he had only 8 assists to the roller in the pick and roll all season. He now has 9 because he hit Jakob on a nice little bounce pass, pocket pass. I think that the skip isn't really a big part of his game. When he's able to take advantage as a passer in the pick and roll, it's when he gets a switch or like a really hard hedge, and it's like Hartenstein diving or Jakob Poeltl diving, and he gets to because that pull up is so deadly, he can drag the big for longer before they get back, before that recover happens. There's a lot of stuff that he's only 24. He's a Kentucky guard. People are saying latent stardom. I kind of want to get your idea on the latent stardom aspect of it from an on-ball point of view. What are your thoughts on Emmanuel taking on a lot more possessions, creating looks, all of that stuff?
We can kind of start with the playmaking because I think that's his skill that if he ever made a big leap in that area, the stardom will probably come and it'll probably come quickly after that point. I think him as a playmaker, I think last year, the previous season was his best season as a playmaker. I thought he made a pretty noticeable jump in that end. And I think coming into this season, it's kind of tailed back a little bit. He's kind of, when he was with the Knicks, he was kind of more focused on being a scorer off the bench this year. And I think part of that is just trying to play for a new contract. It always helps to have some gaudy point per game numbers, But just in terms of you mentioned, the skip pass isn't always there for him. I think that's very true. I think that's probably one of the limitations you'll see with his size. It's a lot harder for those small guards to see those passing windows because they're a lot tighter. They're a lot harder to see. And then I think some of the things with the roller you mentioned, I think Jakob is going to be really good for him. Just that kind of craft as a screener he has. And I think having that little floater that Jakob has, he loves to hit those little pocket passes when it is there. One of the things I noticed with Quickley when he was with the Knicks is he has 2 very kind of different kind of centers, right? You have Mitchell Robinson, who's this lob threat, but if you give it to him anywhere outside the perimeter, he's giving it right back to you. But when he played with Hartenstein, you see a lot of more playing off the dribble handoffs. They're playing catch and flipping the ball over to each other. And I think Jakob is going to be able to do that wonders for him. And also his screening is going to help free him up for the pull-up. So I think there will be more windows available to him just in terms of finding the roller there. And I actually think that I've been high on Quickley from the jump his rookie year. I remember saying that this guy has all-star potential from the jump. And maybe that was a little bit brave to say during his rookie year, but I'm still kind of there. But I don't think it'll be in the sense of he's going to average 25 points per game and give you 8 assists per game. I think a lot of it is going to be the impact stuff, kind of Derek White-ish is what I kind of liken him to. Maybe he's not all the way there to Derek White's level, but I definitely think there's he can be there in a season, maybe 2. And putting him alongside a guy like Scotty, a jumbo big initiator, that's kind of the ideal role for Quickley, right? Where Scotty's going to take on most of the primary initiation stuff, but you still have Quickley who can toggle on and off the ball, and then he kind of helps insulate Scotty's lack of a pull-up shooting, even though he's greatly improved this season, and you can see the jump shot improvement. I think that those 2 are going to play off each other so well. For Quickley, I think this is an amazing fit. If he's going to pop, this is where it's going to be.
Yeah, I think that was the consensus from analysts all around the NBA. I think it was the guys I know in Toronto who really like Quickley and liked him before the trade said yeah, this is a big one. And then you have guys like Nekias Duncan, you have guys like Kevin O'Connor, the in vogue analysts and the big mainstream analysts are all coming together to say this works. Sam Vecini, he wrote a big piece on it too and did video as well. The thing that I'm interested in with Quickley, and you made the Derek White comp, the interesting thing is that Quickley is smaller. and probably won't have some of the more Danny Green type of defensive impact that I think Derek White has been able to have. But Quickley, as far as the difference in jump shooter, is like just a million miles away. When I look at Quickley and I see a lot of stuff that works immediately, toggling on and off ball, he has a really great knack for. You mentioned being able to like all the pitch plays and get actions with Hartenstein and trying to like spy and look for Mitchell Robinson if he can. Gary Trent Jr. and Scotty Barnes, among the high volume dribble handoff tandems last season, were the 6th most efficient. You imagine that you can ratchet that up even further with Quickley and Scotty Barnes. And there should be, I mean, into the future, there should be a significant dynamism between those two. There's just a lot of things they should be able to play off of one another. As you mentioned, that Pirtle should be a guy who is an above average playmaker at his position, is a really talented roller, and is one of the best finishers in the league. If Quickley is going to make those steps and get those reps, this is the spot to do it. And then on top of that, too, Quickley is, above all else, a bucket getter. You also have still on this team Pascal Siakam, who he doesn't necessarily screen to free up guards. He screens to initiate switches because he kills switches, because he's a guy who can go for like even just this season, he's at like 22.5. He's scoring like almost 60% inside the arc. He's abusing switches. It's not such a bad thing. If he's initiating switches, that also means that Quickley is going to have some slower footed guys to boogie on. All this stuff could coalesce into higher rim frequency because it's been quite low over the course of a season, getting into the teeth of the defense where he has been one of the best. I think he's the 6th best player on hitting floaters. I think he's at like 59% this season on the high usage guys, which is, I think there's 60 guys who qualify. He's 6th. His touch is insane. And then also you're looking at a guy who getting into the middle of the defense continuously via a diverse set of screeners and playmakers to work off of. You're going to get a bunch of reps with passing reads to try and make steps that you haven't before. He's in a spot, and a good one, to kind of like try things out. And he's playing for a team that has been starved for, guard creation, particularly rapid guard creation for some time. So the fan base is just like, they've been taught. It's kind of like, I don't know if you watched Dune or Red Dune, but the Bene Gesserit, they had done, propaganda to prepare this whole planet to think that this guy was their messiah. And that's like Quickley, IQ God's son, bro. He has been prepped to walk in and say, I have all these talents that haven't been represented on this team. You like him? Because I like him. He's in a tidy little spot. That's the end of my soliloquy. You let me know what you think.
That was great. That was great. I wish I had the type of wisdom with the words that you do. I wanted to mention, like, you touched on the Siakam kind of posting more, screening more to get the mismatches. Same thing with Julius Randle that Quickley. Like, this isn't something Quickley hasn't played with, And it was kind of sad because the very last game Quickley played with the Knicks was against the Magic, and Julius Randle and Quickley probably had the best synergy that I've ever seen them two have. Like, they were like the only two Knicks who played well that entire game, and it was just because they played off each other. I think you can see it with Siakam, and you'll see it with Barnes. Quickley is a very good screener for his position, right? He's able to, if you're screening Barnes and with Quickley and vice versa, like usually most teams don't have the personnel to be able to like switch that comfortably. One of those two are going to get a mismatch there, and this is the same with Julius. And what you see is a lot of miscommunication, and then Quickley is so frenetic, and I mean that in like a positive way. He's so frenetic that he sets like a bunch of like impromptu screens in transition. I watched the first 3 quarters of the Raptors game yesterday in his debut, and I could see him like setting like kind of screens that I'm like, it's probably just him, like it's a feel thing. And he's just such a high field player that like I can't wait to see like how he builds that chemistry with Siakam if he is there long term, and then Barnes. And I think another thing is just the pace. He loves to push the pace. Like he plays quickly. I didn't even mean to do that, no pun intended. But it's just like I love this fit for him, and I think this is the place where he's gonna like, if he does make that leap, like this is where it's gonna happen.
I do wonder what allows him to, if he gets to stardom, what allows him to access that, because a really cool stat that Lewis wrote in his piece was that Emmanuel Quickley, the points per chance, which is how Second Spectrum tracks it. It's not points per possession because you can have multiple chances in a possession. So typically points per chance are lower than points per possession, but on a drive for Quickley, it was over 1 point per chance, which is quite high. And he was higher than everybody on the Raptors, including Scotty Barnes, including Dennis Schroeder, including OG Anunoby, except for Pascal Siakam. Pascal Siakam is one of the best drivers in the NBA. Quickley getting downhill as a scorer is a big deal. He has a lot of things he can go to. And I'm really interested to see how his scoring repertoire and playmaking repertoire grow in the new system and what his avenue to stardom is. I've talked to a few people. Some people have an idea of Quickley as, he does everything already. He'll just start doing it. I don't think I'm quite of that mind. I think that he has to grow in a couple areas for stardom. I just wonder if he's one of those guys who, if he does access stardom, does it via insane pull-up shot making that allows him to bend and screw with defenses in like a myriad amount of ways, right? Or if the pull-up shot making is more so like it's where it's at currently, which is, well above average, not necessarily great, but well above average, and he starts making more playmaking reads. To have different avenues to stardom is a really big deal. Most people only have one. They call it a swing skill. He has multiple, and he doesn't depend on any one thing really, which I think is a really exciting place to be as a new player coming into a new team to try and like spread your wings. I don't know what the contract situation is going to be, but he's restricted. Raptors fans, he's going to be here next year. We have a comment from in chat from Sharon Baxter says, Quick and Kyle are a good comparison. Both stuck behind other guards, handed the keys to the team when they got there. It's totally up to them to make it work. What do you think about that, Ariel?
That's literally like perfect. And I think they both are like, to like slide into the lane. They like contact. They defended, and Kyle in his prime was a great defender, above average defender, despite his size limitations. Like, I think it's a great comparison. So shout out, what was his name? Shout out to him.
Sharon Baxter. Shout out to
Sharon
her.
Baxter.
So,
her. Sorry.
We have a listener question from Andrew Livingston, which I think fits into this part of the conversation. Says, what may be the frustrating part of Quickley's game that Raptors fans needs to know, only from a perspective of understanding him as a hooper, so patience can be given to him? I noticed a few things first game in. We'll talk about like the similar look inside when it comes to OG. But what are some of the limitations that you think could show up where Raptors fans, they're kind of like wringing their fist maybe?
I think he can over dribble at times. I think there are some possessions where like he spends like literally like 16 seconds just like probing and like in the end he might draw a foul with like 2 seconds left, but it's like an ugly possession because he kind of dribbled it all out. I think those are the possessions that a lot of Knicks fans was like, why isn't Quickley passing the ball? But it's not. I don't think that. I think that was also partly just like the way the Knicks were set up with him, and when RJ was there as well. Is like there were 4 guys on the team who were tasked with creating, and everyone else was like supposed to just play off that. And I think in Toronto it'll be a little bit different than that. I don't think it'll be as strict. Just from what I saw yesterday, it's a lot more free flowing. And even then, Quickley wasn't doing too much dribbling, which I thought was noticeable. And then other than that, I think sometimes he can miss some pretty easy passing reads. Whereas like he kind of can like get a little too aggressive, especially I saw a little bit of that this season. But again, I do think that was some like contract related thing because it was something I hadn't noticed the 3 seasons before. So yeah, that's kind of I think the 2 main things. Whereas like I see a lot of frustration when it comes to Quickley from other Knicks fans when he was here. I'm curious to hear what are the things that you noticed that were like kind of like could be annoying.
So what I noticed firstly is that taking in the game, making different reads, going to different strengths, he killed his dribble a lot, and he was kind of getting stuck in the middle of drives with the Raptors. But also, it's his first game. The Raptors have a lot of reads. They have a continuous motion offense that Darko likes to run. He could just be like killing his dribble because he's expecting like continuous to get to this point. He thinks he's about to make a pass or make a read, and the timing just isn't there. And I didn't necessarily see that with the Knicks. Like, I'm not the Knicks guy. You're the Knicks guy. But I didn't see him, like, killing his dribble unnecessarily above the break lots.
That was an issue for him in seasons past. I think he's gotten a lot better with that, actually, as his ball handling has gotten better. And quick point on the whole rim pressure thing, which is a great point. He used to never get to the rim. Like, his rookie season, he was pull-up 3 and floater or nothing. and the floater was like from the free throw line because he didn't have the strength, he didn't have the skill to get to the rim. And one quick point is just the amount of like improvement he's done since his rookie season is very encouraging, because usually a great sign for knowing if a guy can/will improve is previous improvement. And if you look at where he shot, like where his shots were coming from his rookie season to now, it's not a completely different player, but you see the improvement. And even he's not just raising like, he's not just more shots at the rim, he's more efficient at the rim. He's not just straight floaters around that little mid-range area. He now takes pull-up mid-range jumpers. He used to never do that. So I think he also kind of struggled with kind of balancing all that out for a little bit, especially at the start of last season, where his first month was a little shaky. But once he figured it out, it all clicked, and that's when he made that real push for the Sixth Man of the Year award. So I will say that Quickley is someone that whenever there's been a question mark about him, he has found a way to like improve it. And I think, again, like I'm not saying sky is the limit for him, because I think there are some like real limitations, but I think that if you are going to bet on someone, you bet on someone who's shown that I will improve in this area. And not only will I improve at it, I'll be legitimately good at it. So,
yeah, Raptors fans have seen, saw DeMar DeRozan, who used to only early on in his career, everybody talked to him from the point of view of like just his limitations. And while he never truly got over the 3-point hump, he was a guy who got so clinically incredible at the things that he genuinely, whether it was like footwork, mid-range, interior passing to exterior passing, he became like a top 10 guy in each of those things just through hard work. And it allowed him to create like unique advantages for offenses. It obviously hurt a lot of his off-ball stuff, but if you want an example of like a guy who can just like keep working, adding value because they work hard and they understand their game, that's DeMar. And you see that with other players too. Hopefully that's what happens with IQ. Just to a statistic to mention, he gets to the rim, like his frequency is twice as often now than it was in his rookie season. And this is also like on a Knicks team that has been in a similar fashion to the Raptors, been like searching for spacing. The Knicks are a good team, but they've mostly done it like on defense and the heroism of in order Brunson, Randall, and Quickley as far as like offensive creation. There is contextual room for him to get to the rim more. From Joe Wolfond, another listener question, and a really good one. He's a fantastic writer for The Score. He says, is Emmanuel's floater dependency a feature or a bug? Does need to bump up his rim frequency in order to make the leap? I'm curious what you think about that.
I definitely don't think it's a bug. I think it's a central part to his game. You mentioned the stat earlier that he was like ranked 6th out of 60 in terms of his floater percentage. It's so integral to his game.
If you shoot 59% on any shot,
like a layup,
that's a feature. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. It allows him to kind of, he likes to play in the middle. Like he's very much like he kind of dribbles around and he likes to like find that one seam. And there was one play specifically yesterday where he kind of had an open three from the corner, and he attacked the closeout instead, and he got an easy floater, which is like money for him. The thing is, he's not too dependent on it like he used to be in his rookie season. Like earlier in his career, he was very dependent on it, and a lot of people, me included, thought it was maybe more of a bug than a feature. It was something that he went to. It was kind of like he defaulted into it. It was like, I have nothing else. I can't get all the way to the rim. Let me just toss up a floater because this is what I feel comfortable doing. But now it's a shot that he's getting to because he's dictating the terms of the floater, as opposed to it being something like, I can't get all the way to the rim now, or I didn't create enough space for the mid range here. So I definitely think it's going to be a big part of his game going down to like the end of his career probably.
I'm going to ask a very specific question. So you know how the floater / lob is like the NBA's version of the read option? You could say it's keeper DHO plays, which is a little bit more applicable, but it works the same way, right? Like you see James Harden probably popularized it most, is that this guy is leaping and it's 50-50. He could lob it to Capella or Dwight Howard, or he could just as easily like float the ball in. And that ability to make that decision in air is like really incredible. Has Quickley ever been able to, particularly not with Hartenstein, but with Mitchell Robinson, who is the vertical threat, has he ever been able to like walk that line between, occupying the dropping big with his floater and being able to lob it to a big man, or going the opposite way if the pressure doesn't come.
I think reminds me a lot of Trey Young as well. Trey Young is probably one of the best ever to be
Oh
at
yeah,
that. Yeah.
he's
But
incredible, man.
yeah,
He's just
it's insane. But with Quickly, I don't think so. I don't think it's ever been even like close to those guys' level. Obviously those are like the best ever at that. But I think he's definitely has more of a scorer's mentality once he's around the basket. It, he's never been a good like I'm not gonna say good. That's a little harsh. He's never been a consistent like oh yeah, you can count on him to throw a lob a game or a lob every 2-3 games. It's a little more sparse for him. I don't know if that has to do with the size. I think it's just more so. Usually, when he gets into the teeth of the defense, it's because like the advantage has already been created for him. He's already there to like go up all the way at the basket, or he's just gonna take the floater. And again, 60% is probably a good decision to just go up with it anyways. Maybe that's something that opens up a little bit more for him going forward. But it's definitely he and RJ were like the only two lob throwers on the team in general. RJ was, I think, the best lob thrower. So that's a little quirk for him. But I think Quickley was a little more scorer's mentality with when it comes to getting into the teeth of the defense there.
Okay. Are we leaving anything on the table regarding Emmanuel Quickley before we talk about OG for all the Knicks fans who are watching right now?
I guess a quick little thing to touch on is just the off-ball movement,
Yeah.
the smarts, like again, the feel of like knowing if I cut here, this guy's gonna sink in, and now I'm not getting the three, but maybe RJ behind me will. Like he's just such a smart, heady player. And I think it's just worth mentioning, maybe not diving too deep on, but
Yeah.
look
Well,
out for it.
that's a good point. Is like good cutters, not only do they cut to score points, but they cut understanding their gravity to drag and put the
Mhm.
defense in tough positions. People who watch this podcast or watch some of my breakdowns, like you've seen me break down how the burn cut is important and how like beating the weak side zone with a cut to open up your teammate is,
Mhm.
paramount to success. And even his first three, his first bucket as a Raptor was there's a pick and roll on the other side. He lifts to create the perfect
Mhm.
angle and he cashes a triple. One of the coolest things is that he isn't an all or nothing. Like for all of the stuff about Fred VanVleet, who is still a good guard, who is obviously having a tremendous amount of success with Houston, and that team is playing really well, he has a little bit more of trouble toggling off ball at this point in his career. Quickly, I think, will be more willing to do that and in a more
Mhm.
dynamic fashion.
Mhm.
That's my expectation.
Yeah.
So really excited for that. Okay, we've got OG Anunoby, the newest Nick. Just give me your thoughts on game one, because you had a tweet that said OG Anunoby is as expected, if I'm quoting that correctly.
Yeah, my very first impression, and it's very noticeable with the Knicks because the Knicks kind of had no like real wing 6'8", like your typical like you look
There's
around
like
the league
three
and
guys
ever
like OG in the league. He's very unique.
exactly.
Yeah.
He is huge, like he is huge, and like he's like as big as Randall, and Randall is a monster. So his size just stood out, and I just thought like it's not even like the point of attack defense is elite, right? Like we know that. I thought was what was cool to see and notice was like which I don't know why I didn't put the two together when the deal happened. But just like when he's off the ball and like when it's a difference when the guy helping to rotate at the rim is OG Anunoby versus if it's like RJ Barrett.
Yep.
And that's not even talking about the quality of them as defenders, just the size, like just the sheer size. It makes a big difference. There was a couple plays where like
Hartenstein's big block from behind on Gobert was because OG went up first,
exactly. Yeah, yeah. And it's just like it makes a ton of difference. He had a possession where he's boxing out Gobert and he's like out muscling Gobert and like it's just that kind of thing really jumps. And when I tweeted OG is as advertised, it was like knock down his corner threes, very simple reads, attacking closeouts. The cutting really popped yesterday. The one thing I didn't know that was like advertised or maybe I just didn't see it was how like easy of a leaper he is, even when there's a little bit of traffic and there's congestion.
Yeah, I've
And
been
I
reading
think
enough Samson Folk, man.
I'm slacking. I'm slacking, man. I'm slacking.
That standing dunk is on a 99 condo.
99.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, he had 4 dunks yesterday, and like, I'm not trying to make this a 1-for-1 comparison, but like, he is quote unquote taking RJ's spot in the starting lineup. RJ has 10 dunks all season, not just, and I think 3 of OG's were in the half court.
Yep.
So like, it was like a dramatic difference. Like, it really popped.
A fun stat, just quickly. I don't
Yeah, go ahead.
remember. I think it was during his second season when OG, he had a really great first season, but I was looking at the amount of like half court possessions he ends with a dunk, like a dunk percentage. And
Okay.
OG, whose very first basket in the NBA, catch on the wing, attack a closeout, the guy's off bounds trying to keep up with him, spun, put the guy in a grave, and then dunked on top of him. That's his like
Ooh.
he's a 20 at that point.
Yeah.
He had dunked a very similar percentage of his points as Giannis Antetokounmpo did. That's not a Giannis comp,
Whoa.
but
Yeah, I
that
know,
is
I know.
just OG dunks everything.
Everything.
He's like
Yeah, yeah.
he's incredibly strong. He can go up whenever he wants. He's a lob threat. He is. I've been calling him one of the best cutters in the Eastern Conference for like a long time. He has a great sense of when, like, whether it's 45, but most commonly, like he creeps the baseline like a shadow cat, man.
Yeah.
He's impressive there. He's gonna get a lot of that like scavenger stuff. That is just
Mm-hmm.
because when you dunk everything, hello Mitchell Robinson, hello Knicks fans. You finish a high percentage of your own stuff,
Yeah.
So yeah, he's an incredible cutter, I find.
There's a reason he's so like highly efficient. 17 points per game on like 60 true shooting. Like you do that by like you get easy ones, and you take advantage of them. So I mean, it was just a lot of fun to see that kind of dynamic from him yesterday.
Yeah. The shooting. What's your expectation for him as a shooter? Is it just the corner stuff, or how do you feel about that?
This is the inkling I got from watching a handful of games before he played with the Knicks. He doesn't did I just not watch the right games, or like is there not a lot of movement threes? Is it mostly just spot up? Is it just catch and shoot like purely?
The one before last season, I watched every single pin down or wide pin that he came off of, and he just can't. He just
Yeah.
doesn't.
Okay.
The movement threes are not a facet of his game. The pull-up three, there were a couple seasons where
Yeah,
on
that
really low volume, it seemed encouraging because the stats would be there, but it's so truncated in his transfer, right? That it's just not.
Mm-hmm.
That was why, like, for example, Mikal Bridges and OG were compared as like 3-and-D guys. You're waiting on the jump. Mikal, who obviously doesn't finish like OG,
Mm-hmm.
but he's been able to make more of a creation jump because he's comfortable pulling up. It's very smooth transfer for him. And OG, like that, I would say is his biggest limitation, is the fact that his three-point shooting doesn't really incorporate movement. But he's fantastic without it. So, and like the Knicks, while everybody loves a guy who can do it on movement, as far as like creating standstill three-point looks,
Mm-hmm.
Brunson and Randall create just like heaps
That's what
of
they
heaps.
do.
Yeah.
I will say and this is something else I noticed. He seems more comfortable after, like, let's say he pump fakes defender flyby. He seems more comfortable like pulling up for the two instead of like sidestepping and then knocking that three down. Am I wrong off that? Or
I think both are in his bag. I
Mhm.
think that he's actually more effective doing like pound dribble into the like
Mhm.
find space on the side. I think that's a better
Yeah.
look for him. I think that's
Okay.
actually like not a great like because he fades when he goes in, and I don't know. I like it better when he searches for space on the
Gotcha.
3-point line rather than going all the way in. But also, he is such when he can keep his driving line straight, he can finish over help defense. He can like go shoulder to shoulder with somebody and it won't affect his driving line, right?
Yeah.
As long as he doesn't have to detour, when he puts the ball down, he's very effective on straight line drives. So if a team is really keyed into, let's say, Brunson and Randall, and they don't want to send or they're not very help oriented, I think that he'll have a lot of success as a driver on the weak side. But if teams pay more attention, you might get the charges, the turnovers, all that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
he's not a star. He is just very, very good at what he does. And the standstill shooting is, of course, very, very helpful, even if he's not able to ratchet it up with movement,
There's very few that fit into his archetype that are better than him, if any. He's very good. Another thing that I appreciated yesterday was, and a little bit of the film that I saw beforehand, was the simplicity when he attacks closeouts. In terms of the reads he makes, there's nothing that like he's not trying to hit a home run when he attacks a closeout, right? He's either going up for the rim for the dunk, or he's gonna like find this little dump off, or if he doesn't have it, he just kicks it right back out. And to an
linear
extent,
decision maker.
exactly. Yeah. Very Quentin Grimes is the same way. From what I've seen from him in his career. So it in comparison with like RJ, it was sometimes it's an adventure when he's driving. The decision making is very inconsistent.
Saw that
I feel
last
like
night.
yeah. From possession to possession, the decision making varies a lot. But with OG, it felt very like, oh, I know what I'm doing. Like if I don't have it, then I'm just gonna get rid of it. And that was like I appreciated that the simplicity of it, and like not everything has to be like crazy for it to be like impactful, and that's like the OG story to me. I think like especially on the offensive end at least.
Yeah. OG is like quietly a very helpful offensive player and
Mm-hmm.
loudly, just like one of the best
Impactful
wing
defensively.
defenders in the NBA. Um, I reckon if he has a really strong finish defensively with the Knicks, nobody will care about the month and a half he spent kind of, you use the term before we started recording, quiet quitting on the Raptors defense. He's got a shot at a second year, certainly, of, all defense accolade, something like that. Defensively, he's very impressive to me in like lock and trail defense. He is extremely impressive to me. Like you saw a ton of it against Anthony Edwards.
Yeah,
He
Anthony
like he
Edwards.
was fantastic against Edwards in the season opener with the Raptors. You
Mm-hmm.
probably noticed like that
I
lock and
watched that game
trail.
as well.
Yeah, he keeps the hand up, right? Like he's
Hand
able to
up.
keep it up.
Yeah.
If you want the pick and pop pass, the lane is obscured. He
Sure.
also
Yep.
sits on the hip and he can contest whether it's like your shooting hip or your non-shooting hip. He can get there. He stays on balance. He matches pace. He has pretty good, like sometimes it's a stab step to get around the screen, but like
Mm-hmm.
really good technique. Obviously incredible measurables and athleticism for it. He really plays that strong. Ice defense, he's really great. When you get like that isolation defense, he can really lock a guy between his knees. Like you're trapped. You need escape dribble, and you throw that overhead pass like above the break to get out of
Mm-hmm.
there. He is really impressive on that end. And
I
also
think what
like,
else popped?
yeah, go ahead.
Quickly, just another thing that popped. I watched the game Raptors against the Suns earlier this year, and the one thing that popped was like how high he gets on like shot contests. Like he was up there
Yeah.
with KD contesting that. Devin Booker, he made him like break a few, like not even touch rim, just because of like the quality of his shot contest. Like that. That's another thing that like watching the Knicks, it's like Quentin Grimes, great point of attack defender, but his size kind of limits how high up he gets on those contests. So sometimes he aces every part of the test, but when it comes to like actually getting up to the shot, he does as well as he can. But like
Yep.
when it's against a Devin Booker, sometimes it just doesn't matter.
Yeah. OG is a guy who, for Knicks fans listening, has reliably not only been able to force superstars to shoot worse against him, but he's also been able to reliably suppress their shot attempts, which is, and he's been able to do it. The Raptors used to be like extremely help oriented, and that would be partly the Raptors game plan is like it's OG plus the team concept. But sometimes he's able just to do it on his own, like a guy who will suppress shot attempts, completely change how a team wants to attack offensively. He's done it against some of the best players in the NBA. And I really look forward to some of those big games in the Garden, especially in the playoffs, because you guys are going to be there just to see how good it looks. And growth offensively, I'm not so sure it's coming. That has been something he's reportedly, said he wants. I don't think New York is the team for him to get those reps. But I do think New York is the team where he gets selected to all NBA defensive team, where he probably gets like a healthy amount of cash. And depending on how they build the team going forward, they might have a shot at it being the chip. It's that fourth guy they bring in, but like they currently are in a very tidy spot to try something. I'm excited for what his game is. Like he's a limited player. He's 26 now. The stuff he can't do is objective, but the stuff he can do has always really impressed me, and it's really important and impactful stuff.
I have one quick question about OG's defense, and
Yeah.
his stocks are really down this season.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to hear your opinion if that has more to do with the whole quiet quitting that I mentioned, or we mentioned it earlier, or is that more so with the shift in like the defensive scheme where under Nick Nurse it was a lot more like pressuring the ball and like getting out and like forcing turnovers and playing that kind of style, which and then as opposed to now with like Darko where it seems a lot more like not I don't know if safe is the right word, but it's not as like jumping out and forcing those kind of stocks. So love to hear your thoughts on that.
A lot more of the Raptors' steals this year come below the break than above the break, being advantageous inside the arc. And that's why you see Scotty Barnes really jump up. OG and Pascal, their steals have gone down, and the blocks have gone down because they've been more perimeter oriented. But also, OG just, quite frankly, the defensive intensity was not the same this season, which it over the course of a career, it wanes for guys. And we see it happen all the time. It is what it is. OG wasn't playing as well defensively as he could towards the end of his Raptors tenure. And he flipped the switch in about 0.5 seconds and was like, I'm on the Knicks. We're a playoff team. And like, no shade to OG. A ton of players do that. It's like his defense being really good this year wouldn't have made the Raptors not a bad team to this point. So all's well that ends well. He won a championship there. He's been like a truly, truly impressive defender. It's like he and Doug Christie for the best stretch of defense over their time with the Raptors. He's been one of the best to ever do it on that end of the floor for the Raptors. So I'm excited for what he does in New York. I'm excited to see how big that number is in free agency. And if there is any, projection, or if there's any progress for his offensive game going forward, I think I will be slightly surprised. But of course, super happy for him. He's damn good at basketball. Like that's basically
I'm a lot lower on the possibility of offensive growth, but the weird thing about opportunity, and this applies to all 5 guys in the deal, is just the weird thing about opportunity. Sometimes different aspects of your game pop in one area, in one team than another. So, it's all projections and stuff. But if these guys pop, it would not surprise me in the slightest for any of these guys.
Yeah. RJ Barrett, you interested in the conversation about him?
It's a tough one.
He had a good introduction to the team, I would say. I think that some of the and you talked about how doing different things matters. Like there's more impacts to some things contextual on some teams. Like RJ being able to, on 2 separate possessions, understand the defense is maybe not super set at the back line, push through that back line for like a left-handed finger roll. There's 2 guys that could do that on the Raptors. It's Pascal and Scotty. Nobody else was doing it. RJ immediately has a skill set that's unique in that aspect. And then even when he missed it to go up for his own offensive rebound on 2 different occasions, it's just like that pressure. He's strong getting downhill. There are obviously warts about his driving game that I think everybody is well aware of. A lot of Canadian fans saw it in FIBA as well. Inconsistencies. But he's in a position, I think, with the Raptors where contextually he has a chance to be like a guy who is better defensively than some of the guards we've seen the Raptors playing. He has a chance to provide a little bit more driving pop on the Raptors, and especially in a continuous motion offense, especially playing out more in transition. It's more intuitive for him to be able to pick his spots, and we'll see where the jumper ends up. He is paid a lot of money, but he's 23. He's not the 3rd overall pick for the team anymore. He's a guy who came over in the trade for OG Anunoby. I think hope springs eternal. There's room for RJ to be like a good starter on the Raptors. And if not, like maybe a good bench player or maybe a neutral starter. But any one of those things is just like, maybe that's how it ends up. I know some people, everyone's really optimistic when a guy first joins your team. Some Raptors fans still believe in that stardom. I got to get your take on RJ with the Raptors first and foremost.
RJ is he's so interesting. He's such an interesting player. I think a lot of the frustration that Knicks fans had with RJ in his time in New York, and why some people still believe in that stardom being real, is that a lot of it is low hanging fruit for him, right? If he gets to the rim at will, like he averages, I think, like 10 drives a game, and if he was just if he doesn't have to be an elite finisher to be like for his impact at the rim to really be felt, right? If he's just league average, but he gets there all the time, like that brings a tremendous amount of value. The issue is he's a poor finisher. His touch around the rim is very wonky. There are some ugly shot attempts that you're going to see, and he struggles when there's like elite rim protecting bigs because like he doesn't jump, he doesn't leap off the floor very well.
No vertical pop.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's the anti-OG in terms of like the leaping in traffic and the standing dunk, for example, that we talked about. And like again, like with the drives as well, it's like a lot of times he forces a lot of drives, right? You'll see him draw charges. I saw a little bit of that yesterday, especially in the 3rd quarter, where it was a couple of drives where he kind of forced it up. And like if he just kicked it out a little bit more on those drives, when the best version of RJ in his career has always been when he's driving and kicking, not when he's kind of like driving with like the tunnel vision to like, oh, I need to score here, like the team needs this. When he's kicking out to shooters, like the very first Quickley bucket, you even talked about it earlier. It was RJ coming off the screen on the right side when Quickley lifted on the left, and it's like that's exactly what you want to see from RJ. The issue is it's very inconsistent. Like there will be a 5 game stretch where you're like, is RJ doing the thing? And then there will be another 10 game stretch where it's like, oh man, what is this? Like this is one of the like most negative in terms of like how
Yep.
often the usage and all of that. Like it's one of the most negative starters in the league. And the defense is like the defense is like fine, right? Like to me,
If
I
you
don't.
have existed in the Knicks defense, you've been passable at the very least for the most part. Like
Exactly. Yeah.
it's important. I had this conversation with Lewis about Steph Curry. I was like, you see Steph Curry, his defensive on-offs, whereas like defensive impact is like completely tied into the Warriors, whether they're elite or not. And it's
Mhm.
impressive that Steph Curry can exist within an elite defense. That means he's made huge strides. That means he's making like good decisions as a help
Yep.
the defense guy. That means he's like his technique and he's sticking on scheme when he's playing point of attack stuff. But don't get it twisted and think that he's elite. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
it's like it's
Exactly.
important to exist in that framework, but it doesn't mean that you are like the same as like you're not great because the defense is great. But it's
He's not
meaningful
driving
that
it.
you've yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. RJ is not a driver of like positive defensive impact, but he can definitely like hang there. I think again, like the low hanging fruit with RJ on that end is like we've seen him be a good defender, right? His first 2 seasons in the league, that was like kind of his thing. I had a lot of high hopes. I remember one time doing this really long thread on like his screen navigation against like prime Bradley Beal and like how elite he was in that one game where he was getting around everything. And like since then, it's kind of just maybe there's a game or two where it pops again. But since then, it's been very up and down, as with most of his game. And then the 3 point shooting, I think a lot of people are aware of that. Very inconsistent. He started off the season red hot. I think he was over 40%. Then he had like a migraine, came back from the migraine, and the shooting was pretty awful since then. Um, the thing is with RJ, when having a poor shooter who's also like an inconsistent decision maker and not a good finisher, um, there's going to be a lot of like ugly moments. But when the moments do click, you will see the vision. Like when he's got it all together, you see this kind of jack of all trade wing. And
Yep.
I think that's always been the vision for me. I've never been on the like stardom, RJ's a star, but I think he can be a really damn good starter on a really good team. It's about figuring it out and grabbing that low hanging fruit and kind of just like understanding like that maybe the player he wants to be isn't the player that's probably the most
Sure.
realistic for him. And I think being in Toronto, where he's not third pick anymore, and he's not going to get fed like 28% usage or 27, whatever it is in New York. I think this is a good chance for him, even if the fit is offensively is kind of similar to what's he's had in New York.
Yeah, I think the he is a bully getting to the rim when he's doing it well, similar to Randall.
Yes,
But that isn't similar to Pascal. Pascal is like this lithe water running down, a jagged mountain pass. Like he's sifting through different help
fluid. Yeah.
rotations. He's very fluid. And RJ is a guy who, if you're like, whether RJ is finishing at the rim or not, if you're not a guy who's going to like meet the moment from a physicality point of view, you're gonna end up in the restricted area
Mm-hmm.
because he can really press you down there.
That's you.
He is slow-footed in some respect. He is like lacking that vertical pop, but if he picks his spots better when there isn't as much help defense available, and hopefully with like Quickley, Pascal, and Scotty, and even Jakob, who draws tags and does all this kind of stuff and has gravity as a dump off guy, if he picks his spots better where he can dominate his check without worrying about that help side stuff, and every once in a while you are going to have to make it over the help side guy, there is an avenue to more efficiency as a driver. And hopefully, in the continuous motion offense that the Raptors run, there's more opportunities for stuff like that as they kind of filter in more of this occupied weak side pin in stuff that should work for like Emmanuel Quickley, that can work with Scotty and Emmanuel as like second side options, all that kind of stuff. Who knows? I also was impressed and then aghast. That's kind of like the decision making. We talked about Emmanuel Quickley not being able to like throw the skip really. RJ can throw the skip. This happens with a
Just
lot of
doesn't.
left-handed players because left-handed players are so ungodly strong in their left hand
Mhm.
that RJ, if it's sitting in that left palm, he can kind of spray it
Mhm. Whip it.
wherever and he throws it hard and he's not short. He made a couple passing reads last night that I was like, that's nice. I like that. But then he
Mhm.
made a few more and then he ended up with 5 turnovers and 1 assist. And I was like, what the hell is this guy
Yeah.
doing? Because he'll make a read where I'm like, that was a genuinely inspired read. I'm really impressed he was able to make that. And then he kind of like blew up a 4-on-1 of his own volition because he wasn't sure what to do. And it wasn't like a missed shot. It was like he actually turned the ball over, which to me is crazy. There's a lot of holes there, but you wonder, under a different context, different framework, is there maybe room to like elevate the decision making? And really interesting that he has with the Knicks a higher usage percentage than either Pascal or Scotty have on the whole
Yeah.
season. 27%. Pascal, I think, is at 25. Scotty, I think, is at 24. Quickley is a guy who's hung around like 21 or 22. We have a
Mhm.
listener question from Bobby Webster Loves Yoga that says, how will these players' usage scale on the Raptors and will/can they be effective? Says ideally RJ usage should be lower than Scotty, so 22, 23%. IQ should be around the same as Scotty, 25%. I don't think IQ gets that high, probably.
Mhm.
I'd be surprised. If he does, I think you see a big uptick in assists rather than like
Mhm.
just insane, incredible shot making. RJ needs to be below 23%. I'm like very certain
Yeah.
of that. There are better tough shot makers on the roster. There are better shot creators on the roster. There are better playmakers on the roster. I hope that he adheres to that to some degree. But also, we saw last night in a lineup where Scotty was on the floor and Pascal wasn't. Scotty like wasn't being super aggressive, and RJ was taking a lot of possessions, and he was just kind of like trying to eat the usage.
Yeah.
There is value in that in the correct lineups. That is something that RJ can do positively that other Raptors bench players haven't been able to do. He was also, not doing that much in the starting lineup. So that's why I came away from last night thinking like this seems positive because he was toggling correctly to the lineups.
Mhm.
Of course, when he's with Scotty, you want Scotty to be the number one guy, but when nobody was getting anything below the break and RJ was like, all right, let me get a quick seal. I'm going to try and get to the rim on a post up, a bully drive. All right, take your shots when you get them, I guess.
Yeah.
It's all about application for RJ. And
The
then
thing.
the slow work and grind of adding stuff to your skill set over the course of the contract.
Yeah, the thing about RJ is we've never, well, we have, and it was his second season, and it was pretty easily his best year.
Yeah.
When he scales down and he kind of just becomes more, the only threes I'm taking are catch and shoot, and there'll be straight spot ups. I won't come off movement. And then when his drives are a lot more attacking closeouts in transition, and they're not him initiating, you get cleaner looks from him. I think the reads are a lot easier for him, so you will see that decision making pop a lot more in a good way. I do think that he was very overtasked in New York. I've been hoping his usage would drop over the past like 2 seasons or so. Because it's been clear that like he's not a 27% usage guy, and that's okay. Not a lot of people are. It's a very difficult thing to do in the NBA. It's not a shot at him.
It's kind of
Um,
funny between Toronto and New York. We're talking about crazy offensive environments over the past few years. Like
yeah,
both these teams, it is also funny that like that's the lawsuit, by the way, too, is like play
exactly,
type data. They're both looking at it like this is the worst shit I ever seen. Like
exactly. And they're like, I want some of that too, but it's the similarities are like a little too on point. But yeah, like RJ, another thing that really lacks and hurts his game is he doesn't really have an in between game.
yeah,
Like there's his pull up in the mid range. You can like it never feels like it's going in. The numbers are ugly. But the one thing I will say he has improved on this year is his floaters are a lot more under control. He's
hit one
coming off
last
of two
night.
feet. Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
When he's coming off his 2 feet with his floater, his touch looks immensely better. But when he's coming off the floaters and he's doing it 1 foot, you can kind of bank that it's not going to be a good look. And again, he's a good lob thrower in the in between when he wants to throw the lob. But again, it's just like the like from possession to possession, like you can see a freaking great read where you're like, whoa, he whipped that skip pass to the corner, found the shooter, and the next possession he's like barreling into 3 guys, and it's like, oh, what happened? Like the flashes are loud, and I kind of got to a point when he was in New York where I was like, I think the flashes are just flashes at this point, you know. I kind of lost hope that he would ever find his rhythm consistently in New York. I think that the environment was just the way that they were asking their creators to just like figure everything out and then have the shooters and the off-ball guys play off them. I didn't like that for RJ. But I think watching Toronto's offense yesterday, you mentioned the motion offense and the continuousness of that. I think that'll be healthy for him, getting him on the move, getting him off dribble handoffs, getting him downhill where it doesn't have to be him calling for a pick and roll, doesn't have anything. He resets, come set another screen, Jakob. Like that kind of thing was something that really bogged down possessions in New York. But I think could be less of an issue in Toronto. And I think his usage will drop. I don't think he'll have an insane number. And if he does, then it'll probably be not a good look for Toronto for a while.
Yeah. When RJ is clearly has a bunch of things he can do on the floor, but has never been able to find his way to like efficiency. And so what that typically says to me is that you need like a little bit more role definition, and the team needs to make some things like easier for him. So you just like look at his splits. He's never finished above 60% at the rim in his career. He can. You look at him and you say, this guy can. Why is it so low over the course of his career?
There's no reason he should be that low.
Why is it so low? Because he's taking like some really difficult shots. Simplify, have players like create easier looks for you, pick your spots a little bit better. In the short mid range, has never been above 40%. Again, not efficient, not good. Okay, simplify, choose your spots a little bit better. Long mid range, he's shooting 33% this year, is like 32% on his career. Not something that he's should be doing a lot of. And then the threes, like corner three, 38% this year, 44% in his big shooting year, right? And it's about toggling expectation of what you expect of yourself within the context of the team. He clearly has NBA skills. He clearly, when put in positions to succeed, can give you that. And on a blue moon, when you need his usage in some of these lineups that don't have very aggressive offensive decision makers, he'll pinch in and score for you every once in a while. It might not be efficiency, but it's usage that you need. I think there's room for him to find like a really nice spot with the Raptors. And of course, his jump shot has been, like a question for a long, long time, but we'll see what happens with it. I hope it develops meaningfully. Another listener question from Jonathan Chen, who for my money is the best Canada basketball writer. He basically breaks down the playbook every year. It's awesome. Says, thoughts on why RJ has always been a low stocks guy? Is there a defensive role he was playing that was holding him back, or is he not super active? And I'll just let you handle that one.
It's more that he's not super active on defense. The instincts aren't really there for him. He's played not a bunch of different roles, but he's been the point of attack guy. And every time he's been the point of attack guy for New York, their defense has been really bad. There was the season, which season was that? Last year, actually. And to start the year, they were starting Fournier with him, and he was the point of attack guy with Brunson and Randall. He was the only option physically that could probably try. And the Knicks defense was really, really bad. And then once they swapped Grimes into the starting lineup for Fournier, the defense was great and it was magnificent, and it really helped lead them to where they got at the end of the season. I think off the ball, he'll be in the right spots, 9 times out of 10, like for the most part, he'll be in the right spots, but he will not use his physicality like he does offensively. You can kind of see him get bodied up sometimes. He's fine in isolation. He does really good in matchups against like Jimmy Butler or like Jason Tatum. He's always done really well. He's fine in isolation, but it's like when you get him on the move and you force him to turn his hips, you see the lack of speed and like lateral quickness. Doesn't really have that. The foot speed really lacks. But he's always been a low stocks guy because he just doesn't have that like instinct and that feel on that end. But again, you mentioned this point, and I think it's important to note that like being able to be a part of an elite defense for multiple seasons, that says a lot about you as a player, right? You may not be the one driving that, but If you
Yep.
can be a cog in that, then that means that you can contribute in a positive way.
Yeah. The Raptors are currently 17th per NBA's metrics in defensive rating, 17th in offensive rating, and I think 23rd net rating. There's room for this team to improve this season at the very least. There's room for role definition for the guys incoming. And whereas Quickley, I think you hope it's role definition that allows him to thrive and like spread his wings a little bit more. And for RJ, you hope it's role definition that allows him to be a little bit more precise in his decision making. And he's still going to have opportunities to freelance when it's like bench plus guys. He's going to have opportunities to like on a whim, like little pinch post or something like that. He'll be able to go to some of his strength creation, but role definition, you hope, helps both of these guys, and a new context, you hope, and, you know, a burgeoning superstar to play next to, and still like an all-star level player in Pascal Siakam quietly making everything a lot easier offensively. There's a lot of room to find success.
Yeah.
Do players always find it? Not necessarily. Should the hope be post-trade right after that players will find success? Of course. If you want to say anything else about RJ, go nuts. But I kind of want to talk about Precious for a little bit of time, and then Malachi as a footnote, probably.
Just to finish your point, I guess with RJ, it's like you'd rather see him scale down and then, if necessary, scale up as opposed to vice versa. And I'm just finishing your point right there, essentially.
Yeah. Okay. Precious Achiuwa, do you have any questions for me? The newest big in New York.
Man, I'm gonna just say it's been one game and Knicks fans kind of hate him already. It was an experience. But in his defense, I'll give him against the Timberwolves. It was a really rough matchup because like all his minutes came against Rudy Gobert, and like the size was just seemed like it was too much for him. I think there was like a play where you could see Jalen Brunson like literally like, no, you have to stand here like on an inbounds play. Like I think it was just you got to give him like a little bit of time. But I've seen some clips of Precious in the past where like he does something here, like, wait, whoa, what is that? Like in a good way.
He's one of the best athletes in the NBA.
In
like
the NBA, literally.
I think that, yeah.
Yeah. But he's just like, it seems like it's a roller coaster of like insanely high highs and like insanely low lows. And like I think it'll be funny in a sense to see like how Tibbs handles that, because like that's like the anti-Tibbs kind of player right there. So I don't know.
It's there are two memes that I remember from Precious's time in Toronto. I had this, I can't remember what anime it was from, but it's like a guy driving, you know, a fighter jet, and he says, "I am a genius." And then the next frame is, "Oh no." And that was like a ton of Precious's offensive decision making. Is you're just like, what the hell are you trying to do here, man? That is nuts. And then also one from my friend Louis Atzman was like the Raptors playing basketball, and then it says Precious Achiuwa playing basketball, and it's a Dashun playing the piano. And you're just like, I don't know what's happening here.
Yeah.
His best stretch with the Raptors was an incredibly high. He played more like a wing and a pick and pop big who got to attack closeouts, and that ended with him. His finishing turned around. He was getting a poster like every 3 games. He's an incredible athlete, and it was fueled mostly by, I think it was a 24-game stretch where he took, I think it was like 3.6 threes per game. He shot like 45%. He was incredible. And then we saw him in a playoff series against Joel Embiid when he had Joel Embiid in space, reliably and efficiently scored on him in isolation, so much so that the 76ers started playing zone. And he did this out of the short roll, and he did this in isolation. And it's just like very intriguing to see a big, the same way that like Naz Reid is definitely better than Precious, but the same way that Naz Reid can kind of be like a knuckleball into how other teams want to defend with their bigs. That's the Precious Achiuwa optimistic take, right? Playing as a big man for his guards, has not been able to plant screens reliably. I have like no expectation that he'll find the pacing to play next to Jalen Brunson, because you have to be really talented to figure out the herky jerkiness of Jalen Brunson and to kind of match and preserve passing lanes when he's on ball, because he doesn't even really know what he's going to do. He's just
there's a cadence.
There's a cadence. He's looking for his space. Play off of my space. I score 27 points per game. I'm the dog here. Make it work. Precious probably won't be able to do that. He's best on offense when he gets to kind of play like as a wing. And I don't know if there's much room for him there. So I'm not expecting good things there. What I'm expecting good things is if the Knicks have good offensive lineups or lineups that really know what they want to do offensively, where Precious has a pretty good sense as a wing style cutter, not like shadowing guards or anything like that, but as a guy who can make a cut from the 45 or the baseline. Great timing. I think he was 93rd in points per chance last season on cuts. The whole NBA.
Okay.
Powerful finisher, can finish with both hands. That kind of stuff is good. I don't know, but the best thing he'll be able to do is if you guys want to play a switch heavy defense in a pinch. He is a guy who has primaried Luka, Giannis, Jimmy Butler, Joel Embiid, and has been like incredible doing so.
That's
His
very interesting.
balance, speed, and strength, all of those things, they meet in a very rare spot. That is where most of his value comes from. And I don't know how often he'll get to do that in New York, but that's the pitch.
Okay. Question then, because Tibbs is mostly a drop guy, right? Like the Knicks
Yep.
kind of have their own switch big in a sense with Jericho Sims, and we haven't seen Sims. It's his third season now. Even when he's played, it's been dropped. But when the chances that Sims has had to switch, he's been like a freak. And there was even some experimentation with him last season playing the four. So, do you think Precious's limitations, like in a drop, are that does that have more to do with his positioning on the drop? Is he just like always out of like? Is he pushing up too far, pushing down too low, or is it more of limitations like with the size, or like what do you think leans more?
So he had a really, really strong stretch as a drop big. There was even a game, I reference it every once in a while, where the Hawks stopped running pick and roll for Trae Young because Precious was involved as the dropper. And so they just started having Trae ISO and they won the game. It was a really good decision. Precious has games where he's really, really impressive as the dropping big, high drop, up to touch. And he can man the middle because of his explosiveness to stick with guards. But I think that's mostly a result of him being able to play at the speed of the guard in space.
Interesting.
These are stretches, though. And this is where Precious is kind of how, you mentioned you were seeing RJ's flashes and you wonder to yourself at some point, like, these are probably just flashes. Precious is he's on the knife's edge, right? It's between you start to be a productive defender who consistently does things, or you're a guy who has like incredible flashes every once in a while. Precious is right there. If he can stick in the Knicks rotation as a guy who finds the way to do those things consistently, because I think contextually it was a better fit for him on the Raptors than it was for the Knicks.
I agree.
If he can make it work in New York, I think that's a very strong indicator. If he can't, tough. Kind of what we mentioned with RJ. It's a good thing and it's meaningful if you can fit into the context defensively of a strong defense. Like for all of the woes about RJ's offense, he played like 30 plus minutes for years and years in a really good defense. If Precious can't give them spot minutes and do so effectively when they have so many holes in their front court currently, that's a really bad indicator. He's going to get a shot, and it didn't look good in the first game. I think the defensive stuff, he should be able to fit in. If he can't, bad news.
I think his offensive flashes aren't gonna pop in New York just because knowing how like it's taken like a year and a half of like Hartenstein playing at like the very best version of himself to like just start now getting like high post touches, right?
Man. He's
He's
so
awesome.
good.
He's a great like can't say enough good things about the way he's playing and has played in New York.
I was very upset when I saw the Knicks got him. I was like
surprised. I didn't see that coming.
I was even doing a podcast with Blake Murphy when he signed his like deal out of the draft with the Nuggets, and I was like, "Oh, would have liked to get him." And I've just been sitting here waiting on Hartenstein to be like a Raptor because he's just such an underrated big for like ever, and he probably will be until he retires. Yeah.
And Ian Begley kind of reported this kind of related to the Quickley trade. That part of the reason of the motivation of like wanting to like trade Quickley and RJ and get rid of those like potential money because we don't know what Quickley's deal is going to be, and then RJ's deal is that they want to be able to pay off some of their own guys. And the only guy that's really a free agent coming up for the Knicks right now, besides OG now, is Hartenstein, and I think they wanted to pay him a little bit. But yeah, just an awesome big. But my like original point was with Precious. I don't think he's gonna get that opportunity to like attack closeouts, because like that's not like something that Tibbs wants
Yep.
from his fives, right? His fives are just screen, run to the rim, grab offensive rebounds, which Precious is actually kind of good at. It's pretty good
Oh,
offensive
big time.
rebound.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe he'll bring value there offensively. So like it's really important for him and his context to like really be good on defense and to hit it out of the park. Because if not, Thibodeau does not have patience for like a poor defending center, right? Like Jericho Sims had a chance to start for the Knicks. He had like 2 or 3 rough games, and they immediately signed Taj Gibson. He went straight back to his safety net. So I think Thibodeau got frustrated last night as well, because at the end of the first half, there was one possession where it was like 17 seconds left, and they subbed in Taj Gibson and not Precious. So I don't think that rope is going to be very long. So I think he will get a chance, though. They did trade for him, and I'm sure like he's a very intriguing player, though. Like he's probably one of the most intriguing players in the league right now, just in terms of like guys who can't be like a star. Just like if he pops, though, like he's a lot of fun. But
A good Precious game is like the best roller coaster you've ever been on.
Yeah, like I'm sure he has one. Like if his next game he pops, like they're gonna be Knicks fans saying like, "Oh my God, we might have gotten a steal. He's a star." Like I'm sure it'll come. But he's gonna need to be a little bit more consistent on that end, or he won't get the shot, I believe.
I think his best context was when the Raptors didn't have a center and he was playing like a small 5 and they were playing a very aggressive scheme defensively. And he had a really great run of doing so. But, you know, not enough things happened for him consistently. He had a couple injuries and the Raptors underperformed, that they no longer looked at that as viable. And it went from Masai Ujiri in the wake of saying, you know, in the wake of his trade to the Raptors saying, "You're mine now," which seems to indicate quite a heavy buy-in to he's thrown into this trade, I would say, because I don't think it was of much consequence for either team, which for the Precious believers and the Precious propagandists like myself is a little bit disappointing, maybe. If he can't figure out New York, that's tough, because he'll be in 2 wildly different contexts. And yeah, if you can't make it work defensively in New York as a big, because you should be able to. That's that's where I'm at with Precious.
I like the idea of trying to get him to win with like his activity level, right? Because that's what kind of, when Jericho Sims was good with the Knicks, it was with activity, right? You can win, maybe not for like long stretches, but you can survive a 4-minute stretch a game.
Bust that ass, man. You know?
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see.
Yeah, that's kind of, we'll see what happens. I hope for very good things for Precious. And as you said, like a good Precious stretch can include some of the craziest things you've seen. And like his highlight reel, if you cut it,
I've seen it. Yeah,
it looks nuts. You're like, this guy does these things. But you know, Naz Reid is a really easy comp. Naz has figured out his more consistent impact. Naz does things more consistently. Naz does things that you can do every possession instead of like, because like the thing about Precious too is that you're watching it and you're like, ooh, this is like star pop. But it's like, where's the role player pop? You know, because you have to be able to do both. And being a guy who only provides like the star pop every once in a while puts coaches in a really tough position as far as like, okay, well, I want you to help the good players on the team right now, and I want impact currently. How do we make that happen? And you're like, I will dunk a guy into the rim every 6th game, and I'll like slither to the rim and finish left-handed, and you won't be able to believe I did it. And I'll have like 6 isolation defensive possessions on the best guards in the league, and you'll be so happy. It's like, but what about the rest? I don't know about the rest. That's kind of like Precious has to figure out the rest. Malachi Flynn. Any preconceived notions about Malachi when he got to the Knicks?
I don't know if you remember, but we spoke on here a couple months ago, and I was like, every time I see Malachi Flynn, like he does some good things. Like, what's up with him? And you kind of told me, you gave me a little rundown, and then he got thrown into this trade, and I kind of laughed in my head a little bit. I was like, oh, that's funny. But I'm gonna be honest, I don't think he's gonna get a lot of burn here. I think the Knicks signing Deuce to that deal, that extension, kind of signaled that like Deuce is gonna get the chance. And unless like Deuce really like plays really poorly and the Knicks don't bring in another option, which I think is what's going to happen, I don't think Flynn is going to get a lot of playing time. Much to the dismay of his father, I believe, from what I saw on Twitter. But in terms of him, I think he's like a very like hot and cold player, but the cold runs a little bit more consistently than the hot, from what I've seen. I do think that like maybe he gets a shot just because he probably brings a little more like creation on the ball than Deuce does. But again, that's like a very like small margin that like it's like if you're competing between Flynn or Deuce, you probably like have an issue in terms of like who your creators
Yep.
are. So yeah, I don't have high hopes. Of course he could shock me, he could shock a lot of people, but
Shock the world.
yeah, exactly, he could shock the world. But again, if you're getting shocked, it's because your expectations are low, and my expectations are low.
Yeah. The expectations for Malachi have been really low. And so much so that there was like Malachi positivity this season. I'm sure if you go poke around and look at the numbers, you'll be like, really? He had like
Mhm.
a bunch of positivity. It was just like so his impact was so low. He's small on defense, despite winning Defensive Player of the Year in his conference before he got drafted, despite being, college basketball's best pick and roll guard before he got drafted, and despite being a guy who I think a lot of people were expecting the jump shot to translate and develop. None of it hit. When none of it hits and like you don't have a strength to work off of, it becomes really hard to like walk into a game and understand where your impact is coming from, especially as an on-ball player. He hasn't been able to figure out the in-between stuff. He hasn't become like a dynamite catch and shoot guy that you just like, if he was that guard, despite not being able to create much, if you put him on the floor, you're like, if it's swing, it ends up in his hands, you feel pretty good. He's not necessarily that guy either. And you're going to start missing something defensively. He has to figure out like on-ball craft, and he really has to like bang triples to find his way to impact. And he did put on like, I think like maybe like 7 or 8 pounds of muscle this past offseason. Well done to him to make like when you're trudging through the middle of the defense, you provide more resistance. Other players feel that, but he still is a guy who competes defensively. Sharon Baxter says he hustles, but hustles to nowhere is kind of like apt. It's hard to implement yourself on the NBA court at the NBA level when you don't know what you're supposed to be implementing, like what strength you're supposed to be working off of. And he's like, what, 24, like now, maybe close to 25. It's tough. He maybe ends up. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say you need a foundation in the NBA. Like you need something that like when everything else is going wrong, what do I fall back on? Is it my pull up shooting? Is it my spot up shooting? Is it getting to the rim? And when you don't have that, and like you can get lost in the shuffle pretty easily. And again, kind of to tie it back to the whole Deuce little backup point guard battle they probably have going on, is that with Deuce, you're gonna get like elite point of attack defense. So even if his shot is struggling, at least on one end of the floor, you're going to get some type of value. And Flynn doesn't have that right now. And again, like you mentioned, his age and kind of the situation in general, like the clock is ticking for him. So like if he wants to stick in the NBA, this is probably like if he does get a shot, he's going to have to really like take off with it.
And coaches, especially with guards, they're probably not going to go for the guy who just came in who has like a murky impact or whatever. They're probably going to see the guy they've watched in practice for a long time, seen reps in game. He's up against it, I would say, but he's probably going to be, a second draft guy. I don't know who takes a flyer on him in the summer. I don't know if he's headed overseas. I don't know what's going on, but it's an interesting rest of career for Malachi from this point on. Anything else you want to say about this trade? I feel like we talked almost everything. Yeah.
Yeah. I think an interesting, and I guess I've been thinking about this a lot. This is less like diving into the players and just more so like from a fan perspective. I think it's like interesting for both fans, like the Raptors and the Knicks, seeing these players that we've like kind of all seen grow up. Like OG's been a Raptor his entire life, right? Even Malachi, even though it hasn't been like this great stretch run. Quickley and RJ, just watching these guys, watching them grow. I think the trade, like, it was like very interesting to see from that perspective. Like homegrown players getting traded and then like having to adjust to this brand new thing. But in a way, both fan bases are kind of happy because like I think Raptor fans feel like OG's gonna get his proper praise and with the New York media now, and like people will really see his defense pop and they'll see the impact he brings. And Knicks fans are kind of like, oh, RJ's gonna get this fresh new chance, and Quickley's gonna have this chance to really pop and like show people that like, oh, Knicks fans weren't crazy for thinking that like he could scale up and be something else. So I think just like viewing it just from that lens, it's like I kind of like how it all kind of turned out, and I think there's a chance that like this is a very like a true win-win deal. I don't like picking winners and losers after like a day after a trade, but like just in terms of like I think both teams are kind of getting exactly what they want and need. And just watching one game of each team so far, it's like the rosters feel like they make a little bit
It
more
makes
sense now.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, like the balance, the roster balances for both teams were kind of a little bit wonky, and now they're a lot more like they're clearer, and like we'll see where it goes for both teams going forward. But like I think for the most part, most people are happy here. Like the players, I think are kind of happy. I think the fan bases are kind of happy, and both are excited to kind of go in their new direction. So just a little point there.
I think I still feel, even as Tyrese Halliburton is like putting up ungodly, very gaudy statistics, I still look at that Kings Pacers trade as a win-win. I think that it allowed the Kings to play a style of basketball they wouldn't have been able to otherwise. I think that it emboldened a lot of their current players, De'Aaron Fox, most importantly. I think it keeps Fox in that area. It allows them to be competitive, to build on things, to have a structure, and the Pacers get a shot at one of the best offenses of all time. They work from that as their foundation. They have a bunch of interesting players. They try and work on their defense. I think that like that was a win-win. I think that this is a win-win, like immediately, and you can see the avenue and like going into the future how it works better as time goes on for each team. It's a freak show that it was the two teams that are engaged in a legal battle that have come together on such a harmonious trade. But I mean, that's the way it shakes out.
Yeah. And I think the next thing now is just like both teams are kind of now like, what's the next step? With like the Raptors have the whole Siakam thing, and now the Knicks have like who's the next star thing. Yeah. And I think both these deals like provided clarity to both fan bases in that sense. Because I think both fan bases were kind of getting impatient.
Do you think the Knicks were looking at every star player, how their team was rumored trying to go after OG Anunoby, that like stars clearly wanted OG as a point of attack guy and a guy to hit triples, that they're like, let's just bring him to New York and see if we can get a guy to come play,
Yeah, I think they kind of like, I think most teams, they go for like, the immediate number one guy first, and then they bring in the ancillary guys. I think they brought in OG first, and now they're looking for like their number one or two to Brunson or whatever.
And they'll have a shot at it.
Yeah. Like this is the first step into like opening their championship window, I think. Like I don't think they're a title contender as constructed right now, but with the right deal, with the right swing, they're knocking on the door. The door's open for them.
Yeah, to the letter. I agree with that. For the listeners, before we get out of here, make sure to like the video. It'll help suggest this conversation to other people. It's free. It helps us. And you've been watching us for a while. You must like us, guys. But Ariel, do you want to say anything to the listeners before we get out of here?
Yeah. Take care of Quickley. Take care of RJ, first of all. Make sure you drop a like, subscribe. Sam does a lot of great work for the Raptors Republic. And if you guys want to follow me on Twitter, it's at A Pacheco NBA. Do a lot of like film stuff, starting to write a little bit more. And if you guys ever have questions, you guys can DM me. I'll answer anything. So yeah, just feel free to reach out with anything. I appreciate you, by the way.
Yeah, of course, man. My favorite Knicks follow, of course. Always dropping like great insights, and I'm very like people know because I talk about it, but I'm very, very picky about like what I read and what I listen to and all that kind of stuff. So
I'm there with you. Like,
yeah. So you've made it, and I a very hearty suggestion for everyone else to indulge in their Knicks content, Knicks written work, and all that kind of stuff via you. Yeah, as for myself, like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you want to support RaptorsRepublic.com, you can do so via our subscription model, which pays writers, a diverse set of them, so that we don't have to do internships with the duopoly of the big Canadian media companies that I consider predatory from an economic standpoint. And so we can pay people without them having to do all that kind of stuff, all that junk. I'll be on the Strickland to talk probably mostly about OG and Precious and all that kind of stuff for Knicks fans who are listening and want a little bit more there. Raptors fans, I hope you really enjoyed this. To anybody listening, from myself and Ariel, we love you. Thanks for tuning in. And whether you got into this in the morning or at night, have a blessed day and goodbye.